He was once the only trace of warmth in Talia's dark, gloomy childhood.
But as the years slipped by, they eventually became nothing but strangers. On the eve of the grand banquet, in this latest masterpiece by the artist of Who Made Me a Princess, Talia was waiting for her nanny to help her dress up.
"You look so much like Lady Sinivar," the nanny whispered.
Hearing those words, Talia lost her temper and slapped her hard across the face.
"Go get my dress," she snapped. Her gown was an exact replica of the one her mother wore when she first entered the imperial palace. On that day, Sinevia looked like an absolute angel. Everyone was completely mesmerized.
Even His Majesty the Emperor.
But Talia wanted no part of these sickening memories.
Once she was fully dressed and ready, she looked like a goddess descended from the heavens.
"Tonight, I want to be more dazzling than anyone else.
Even more beautiful than my mother.
I want everyone's eyes locked onto me. That way, no one will look at Ayla." But as this twisted thought took root, it warped her exquisitely beautiful face,
making her realize that such a look was completely unfit for an imperial princess.
She grabbed a nearby candelabra and smashed it right into the mirror. Talia replayed the nanny's words in her head. Even if His Majesty couldn't take his eyes off her mother back then,
it was still a disgusting, shameful affair.
Only after the former empress died did her mother finally steal the crown. But that shameless sin would never be washed away. She coldly commanded, "I'm tired of looking at this mirror. Get me a new one." Later, as Talia sat in her carriage, staring out the window,
she watched the blood-red glow of the setting sun.
She couldn't help but fall deep into a dark reverie.
How wonderful would it be if tonight's banquet could be painted in that very blood-red color?
I really hope a massive chaos breaks out. I want everything to be ruined.
Amidst her twisted thoughts, she arrived at her destination.
When the banquet officially began, Talia made a grand entrance, dressed in striking, vibrant red. Noticing an empty seat in the venue, she felt a quiet rush of smug satisfaction, a wicked amusement glinting in her eyes. Since she made such a massive fool of herself over that incident, we probably won't be seeing Ayla here today. Spilling red wine is just like tearing out a bleeding heart. Oh, how I wish it would actually turn out that way. Honestly, I wished you just dropped dead. Right at that moment, Count Killian stepped forward with a polite greeting.
He was serving Talia under the direct orders of the Empress,
and Killian considered it an absolute honor.
After all, there wasn't a single man in the room who wasn't captivated by her. They were just too terrified of drawing the Crown Prince's wrath.
As for Killian himself,
he had been blacklisted long ago, so he really had nothing to lose.
With everyone watching, Killian asked Talia for a dance. "Since they all want me to vanish and rot in a corner like some invisible ghost, then I'll do the exact opposite." The sight of them dancing so gracefully left the crowd utterly mesmerized.
Feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on her, Talia felt a surge of wicked pleasure.
But just at that moment, the Crown Prince and the First Princess made their grand entrance. The imposing Gareth and the elegant Ayla instantly stole the entire room's attention. Talia looked around the room, watching the guests whisper among themselves. Her gaze turned freezing cold. "Don't you dare compare us. Don't ever put me in the same category as those two."
Clane whispered, "Those two seem to be acting like you don't even exist."
"Do you plan to go over and pay your respects? That is exactly why I came here." With that, she grabbed a glass of red wine and started to walk forward. But out of the corner of her eye, she caught sight of Varkas. He was standing completely still, his eyes fixed on her. But then, Varkas began to step closer to Ayla.
Talia's grip on her wine glass tightened, her knuckles turning white.
As she watched the two of them hold hands, fury exploded inside her. "Get your hands off Varkas!" Seeing her entire body tremble, Killian gently advised, "Wouldn't it be better if we just slipped out of the hall?" His words instantly snapped her out of it. "I didn't come all this way just to make a pathetic retreat." Talia quickly made her way over to the three of them. "My respected brother and my dearest sister, seeing you fully recovered brings me such absolute joy. The state you were in before, it had us all so terribly worried." Faced with such blatant passive aggression, Ayla replied with surprising grace instead. "Thank you for your concern. Thanks to you, I am doing perfectly fine now." Talia remained calm on the surface, but inside her emotions were a chaotic, violent storm. She knows damn well that I was the one who did this to her. Yet, her expression made it look as though he wasn't even worth getting angry over, as if she were staring at a piece of absolute trash.
If I had known, I should have used a lethal poison from the start.
Even if I had to face the most brutal punishment, even if I ended up burned beyond recognition, I should have poisoned a mute anyway. Good Gareth didn't have that kind of patience. "How dare you show your face here!" he roared, and dressed in such a cheap, pathetic way. Instead of getting angry, Talia
actually began to gloat. "This is the very dress Mother wore when she first met His Majesty.
Our father must have absolutely loved it. Don't you agree?" Ayla stopped Gareth just in time. "Regardless, thank you for making the effort to come. Today is a truly meaningful day for me. I want to receive blessings from as many people as possible. The official date for my wedding with Varkas has been set. Then that day, I will head to the east and become a member of the Sior Khan family. I'm so glad I got to see you before leaving the Imperial Palace." At that moment, Talia couldn't take it anymore. She splashed the red wine in her hand straight onto Ayla's chest,
right over her heart. The banquet hall fell dead silent. Only Talia spoke, a sweet smile on her face. I'll pray every single day, hoping that you, sister, will end up looking just like this very soon.
A sudden weightlessness made Talia gasp in shock.
The boy locked her tight in his arms and ordered the struggling girl, "Don't move." She immediately went still, obeying him.
He carefully adjusted his hold, terrified of hurting the little bird tucked inside his shirt.
His steps were light, as swift and agile as a wildcat. But even though they escaped quickly, his belongings still weren't spared.
He looked down at his mud-caked boots. This is just great.
Since you got into this mess trying to help me, I'll compensate you.
After all, I happen to be the woman of a very powerful figure.
She had only said it to smooth things over,
But for some reason, he looked displeased.
You've got quite the mouth for a little brat.
Talia's face flushed bright red.
How dare a mere commoner talk to the Emperor's daughter like that?
but for some reason she couldn't utter a single word to fight back.
The freezing rain kept beating down on her forehead and cheeks.
Yet her face felt as hot as if it were on fire. The boys stopped beneath the giant, ancient tree of Sinville, the one they could never chop down. Just then, the little bird let out a weak chirp.
"What are you holding there?" the boy asked. She carefully opened her palm.
"Is that a bird?" he mumbled skeptically. Leah's cheeks burned hot.
It was obviously the bird that looked horribly ugly. Yet for some reason, she felt just as pathetic and miserable herself.
It only looks like this because it fell into the mud. Maybe it would have been prettier otherwise.
But she swallowed the words before they could leave her mouth. Yet, the boy seemed to feel a pang of pity for the incredibly pitiful little bird. He supported her with one arm and pulled her hand, the one holding the bird, inside his cloak.
Leah's eyes widened.
The skin her fingertips brushed against was as warm as firelight. "Your fingers are like icicles."
Just how long have you been standing there?
The boy suddenly turned to look at her.
Leah stared at him, dazed, unconsciously murmuring, "There are silver crowns in your eyes."
The boy's eyes widened slightly.
His lips parted, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he closed them in silence. Leah realized this nameless boy was also staring deep into her own eyes. What on earth does he see in my eyes? As she wondered, a familiar call echoed from the distance.
My lady! It was her nanny's voice.
The voice, heavy with anxiety, echoed continuously through the valley.
I have to go,
Leah whispered,
feeling a strange, deep reluctance to say goodbye. Perhaps the boy didn't want to hear those words either. After a long, quiet pause, Pi finally, reluctantly, set her down. The moment his arms pulled away, a bone-chilling cold surged back, feeling several times more freezing than before. Only then did she realize just how warm the boy's embrace had been. After hesitating over and over, she held out the baby bird to him. "Can you take care of it? Because my hands are too cold. And you're so warm."
just as she was about to say it.
He had already leaned down and carefully taken the little bird from her, cradling the ball of fluff against his plaster-pale cheek. Leia looked up, staring at the seam, and suddenly asked, "Will that bird survive?"
"It will survive."
Blue eyes beneath a silver crown lingered on her face for a long time. The boy remained expressionless, but Leah couldn't help but feel that he had smiled. Just for a moment, she then turned and rushed into the mist-shrouded garden. Not knowing how long she ran among the mounds of dirt,
She looked back on a strange impulse, only to see him still standing quietly under the ancient tree.
why didn't he leave? Perhaps he was waiting for the rain to ease up, or perhaps he was watching her walk away. Suddenly, Leo was seized by a desperate urge to run back to his side. She wanted to seek shelter from the rain with him. More than anything, she wanted to sit side by side with him by a warm fireplace, watching the fledgling nurse back to health.
But as she hesitated,
Her nanny suddenly grabbed her from behind.
"Where on earth have you been?
"Do you have any idea how desperately Lady Senevier has been looking for you?
Look at this disgraceful mess. What is wrong with you?
You are about to have an audience with His Majesty."
What are we going to do with your dress ruined like this?"
The nanny ranted unreasonably, dragging her along as she stormed down the corridor leading to the side palace. Stumbling as she was dragged away, Leah couldn't help but look back once more, but his figure had already vanished. When the artist of Who Made Me a Princess collaborates with the original author of Under the Oak Tree, what kind of breathtaking masterpiece is born from this dream collaboration? The magical webtoon, The Forgotten Field, has finally arrived. Born as an illegitimate princess, Leah is despised by her half-siblings and tormented by her maids. Even Varkas, the only light in her dark world, has turned cold and distant. Yet Senevier, the mastermind behind all her misery, refuses to lift a finger to help. Instead, she only delivers a cold warning. The strong and beautiful are revered and admired, while the beautiful but weak are merely playthings to be crushed. And so, unwanted and unloved, Leah grows up in the shadows.
Just as her sister Ayla and Varkas are preparing to set off on their holy pilgrimage,
The Empress and the Emperor summon them back, demanding that they take Leah with them. But for a royal lady, embarking on a pilgrimage usually means her wedding is just around the corner.
with a sharp smile, Senevier replies,
That is because she too is getting married.
Her betrothed is none other than Count Syrian. Both of them are left in utter shock, for the Count is a loyal follower of Sinevere herself. Yet Leah herself is kept completely in the dark.
It isn't until her younger brother Othros sneaks over to tell her that she finds out. After sending her clingy brother away, she confronts her mother in a fit of rage, demanding to know why she would do such a thing.
Sinevere simply sneers. Is the son of Grand Duke Shere Khan the only one you want? But I kept him chained to your side for 7 years. And what did you actually achieve?
You are nothing but a failure. You will either obey my arrangements. This is your last and only chance. He had nothing left to say to that. The next day, she packed a massive amount of luggage,
All just to outshine her older sister. Era.
She insisted on wearing magnificent gowns and jewelry every single day, but Valkis insisted on unloading it all.
Even though Leah fought back with all her might, kicking and screaming,
She was completely pinned down. In the end, Valkis threw her over his shoulder and slammed her heavily into the carriage. Sit still and behave yourself! Leah felt utterly humiliated. She immediately slapped him hard across the face. He pointed to the red mark on his cheek and said, "The crime of touching Her Highness's body without permission. We can consider it paid off with this, but I have no intention of continuing to tolerate your tantrums. I am no longer your loyal knight." With that, he slammed the carriage door shut. He curled up in a helpless ball. A journey destined to be a nightmare had begun. How she wished this carriage were heading straight to hell.
only everything could just end. Right here.
That would be such a relief. After being treated so brutally by Voltus, Leah huddled inside the carriage as if staging a silent protest. She didn't show her face until the convoy had completely left the capital and stopped by a riverbank to rest. By then, she was already dressed in her finest gown. When her personal guard, Edric, saw her like this, an expression of pure disbelief washed over his face. He was just about to step forward to ask her about it. In the twilight, dressed in her grand attire, Leah looked as if she were forged from molten gold and blazing fire, the wind whipping up her golden hair like waves of wheat. He instinctively took a step back. An indescribable feeling made his throat tighten. In the next second, Leah gave a cold command. "I hate this place. Move the camp immediately." This absurd order snapped Edric right back to reality. Suppressing his rising anger, he adopted a strictly professional tone and replied stiffly, "This campsite was chosen by the Royal Guard to ensure our safety. It is impossible to search for another location. Who asked for your opinion? Think for your opinion." She shot him a glare, cold as ice. "I ordered you to move the camp. Your only job is to obey." He had to take a deep breath to suppress his fury. All decision-making power for this expedition lies in the hands of Lord Valkes. So basically, as long as Barkas agrees, it's fine. The girl who had interrupted him spun around sharply. It seemed like she had been looking for a fight with Lord Barkas from the very beginning, completely ignoring all reasoning. No matter what, Leah stubbornly clung to her ridiculous, unreasonable demands. Edric, with an ashen face, looked down at the princess. Even a 5-year-old child wouldn't throw a temper tantrum like this. He desperately fought to suppress the rising tide of frustration. They would have to camp outdoors for the next few days, so they needed to adapt as quickly as possible. Seeing that Edric refused to back down, Leah instantly lost her temper. She raised her hand and slapped him right across the face. The burning sting on his cheek made a flash of murderous rage flare up in Edric's eyes. Taking advantage of his shock, Leah grabbed him by the collar and snarled, "I am the Emperor's daughter. You are nothing but servants meant to obey my every command. Even if I make you march all night until dawn, that is your duty? Don't you dare presume to be insolent with me. Now get the hell away from me." Clutching his face, Edric stared at her petite yet overbearing figure as she walked away, wishing he could just hoist her over his shoulder and throw her back into the carriage like Barkas did. But he didn't have a powerful backer, so he had no choice but to swallow his anger. As Liam walked away with quick steps, she cast a sharp, searching glance behind her. Instantly, those who had been stealing glances at her pretended to admire the scenery. There must be my mother's spies here. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She was terrified that Seville would target Barkas. Only one thought consumed her. She had to separate the camps. They needed to keep a physical distance between them. So, she marched straight toward Barkas's tent. Whipping open the tent flap, she immediately demanded a camp relocation. But the moment the words left her mouth, she froze in her tracks. Marcus was standing there, completely bare-chested, wiping the water droplets from his face with a towel. Under the dim light, his pale, sculpted, and athletic physique came into full view. Leah's face instantly flushed bright red. This was the first time she had ever seen him look so completely off guard. But her embarrassment quickly receded like the tide, and irritation rapidly took its place. Leah narrowed her delicate eyes, glaring right at him. She declared arrogantly, "As knights, you are born to obey me, a member of the imperial family. So keep your subordinates in line, and make sure they understand whose orders they must prioritize. Now order the knights to move the camp immediately." But Barkas simply grabbed his cloak off the wall. He marched straight out of the tent. Leah stared blankly at his retreating back, before quickly chasing after him. Compared to a furious outburst, his grave-like silence, treating her with utter indifference, as if she were a common roadside stone, was far more than she could bear. "Do you really have to tune out every single word I say, just to feel satisfied?" But Barkas didn't even bat an eye. She swiftly grabbed him by his coat, spitting out every single word through gritted teeth.
You've been dying to do this all this time, haven't you?
A matey. Finally, you don't have to take orders from a mere human girl.
You must be absolutely thrilled, aren't you?
Barca shot back coldly.
If what you said actually sounded like human words,
Maybe I'd pretend to listen.
a deep sense of humiliation washed over Leah,
Spurring her to lash out even harder.
Can't understand human speech? Do you need to communicate in some beast tongue, just like your barbarian ancestors? The attendants watched this line-crossing humiliation, their faces pale with fear.
If that's what you want, I can even neigh like a horse for you.
After all, you must be much more used to that.
Barca sneered and retorted.
Even my horse, Drama, communicates better than you.
At least she doesn't whine and cry all day to annoy people.
Leah's shoulders trembled with humiliation. Marcus's lips curled into a mocking smirk.
You turn red the moment someone fires back.
Yet you never hesitate to strike where it hurts most.
Do you honestly think no one else in this world can be as cruel as you?
Leah glared at him with venomous eyes.
Desperately wanting to scream, "What do you even know about me? Who in this world knows the ugliness of human nature better than I do?"
But she took a step back, masking her hostility.
I didn't come here for a pointless war of words. I want the camp moved.
Order the knights to pack up immediately. Marca took a deep breath, suppressing his rising anger.
I have no interest in indulging your tantrums. Seeing that he refused to budge,
Lee tried to use her royal status to pressure him,
but that only snapped the last thread of Barcus's patience.
a heavy shadow loomed over her as Barca looked down coldly. My patience for you today has officially run out.
You've caused enough of a scene. Learn when to stop.
With that, he straightened up and ordered the knights. Escort her Imperial Highness back to her tent. Blocked by the knights, Leah stood there, both furious and utterly humiliated.
He didn't even ask why she wanted to relocate. He didn't care about her feelings in the slightest.
To think she was actually worried something terrible had happened to him just moments ago.
Talia couldn't help but laugh bitterly at her own foolishness.
Deep down, a dark thought began to fester. It would be so much cleaner if he just died. The agonizing pain and obsession consumed every inch of Talia's being.
No matter how hard she tried to rick it out,
This obsession grew wildly, like a malignant tumor.
every single day she cursed him, wishing to see Varkus's cold corpse.
But in the dead of night, a suffocating wave of fear would always seize her. Only when she saw with her own eyes that Varkus was safe and sound could the heavy weight, suffocating her chest, finally lift. She walked anxiously down the narrow, overgrown path through the bushes. She stopped dead in her tracks only when she heard the sound of a horse,
Varkus skillfully led the tall horse over to the spring.
gently stroking the war horse's long, sturdy neck. The moonlight filtering through the dense leaves dyed his hair a brilliant silver. Gazing silently at this sight, Talia finally closed her eyes in utter despair.
No matter how she tried to gouge out her own heart and scrape her bones,
Her love for Varkus still grew wildly like a poisonous tumor. How on earth could she ever rid herself of this feeling? Just as Talia was about to stand up and leave,
she noticed Ayla walking down the path. She looked as if she had just woken up and rushed outside in a hurry.
with only a cloak loosely thrown over her thin nightgown.
Talia had never seen Ayla look like that before.
Ayla carefully slipped off her shoes and dipped her feet into the cool spring water.
Varkus's gaze fell upon her. Even his quiet, intense gaze carried an irresistible tenderness.
Talia fought down the fierce urge to rush out immediately. Marcus bent down to dry her feet, and then, like a loyal servant, he gently put her shoes back on.
The scene was like a sharp knife stabbing straight into Talia's heart.
Talia turned and began to run.
Suddenly, she tripped over a protruding tree root and fell heavily to the ground.
Talia's body began to tremble uncontrollably.
If Genevieve saw her like this, what would she say?
She would probably furrow her beautiful brows and shake her head in disappointment. She seemed to expect me to turn into a whore just to seduce him. But Talia would rather die than become a monster like Genevieve.
Other than praying for this agonizing time to end quickly, she had absolutely no idea what else to do.
When she dragged her exhausted feet out of the dark forest path,
She was greeted by the sight of several helpless knights standing there. He brushed right past the knight and stepped up onto the carriage. But the man didn't seem to have any intention of stopping his lecturing.
a mocking smirk played on Leah's lips.
To anyone else, it might actually look like you're worried about me. You're the idiot who spaced out and lost track of them. Why the hell are you blaming me?
Leah slammed the door right in his face, leaving the man to curse loudly as his fingers got pinched in the frame.
As always, she let the complaints from outside go in one ear and out the other. If she took every single word people said to heart,
She would have gone crazy a long time ago.
as the young crown prince stepped onto the monastery's vast estate, hundreds of citizens lined the streets, tossing flower petals.
A moment later, a man dressed in snow-white monastic robes walked up to him.
Gareth dismounted his horse and spoke in his characteristically arrogant, royal tone. "By royal tradition,
Please bestow your blessing upon us, in the name of the saint.
after reclining respectfully, the abbot cautiously suggested, "Why not retire to my humble quarters first to rest for the day?"
To welcome your highness.
"We have already prepared a grand feast several days in advance." He hesitated slightly. Staying at the abbot's private quarters might raise suspicions of political lobbying. Gareth glanced sideways at Valkus behind him.
Valkus slowly scanned the monastery, as if in deep thought. Only after a long pause did he nod. Very well. We will stay at the abbot's residence tonight.
At the same time, he didn't forget to instruct Valcase. Keep a close eye on Era. It's her first time traveling so far, so she's bound to feel out of place. Valcas, who was gently patting his horse's neck, nodded slightly.
Gareth frowned. If only you cared for my sister as much as you do Emma.
Suddenly, his gaze drifted to the luxurious carriage,
And his brow furrowed deep.
If she dares to play any tricks,
I will personally snap that slender neck of hers.
It would be nice if things could stay this quiet. But that thought was quickly shattered when Liege showed up at the banquet.
Valcas finally stopped watching coldly from the sidelines.
Just when things were about to spiral out of control, he actually stepped up to stand by Leah's side. At the grand banquet, just as Gareth was preparing to give his closing speech, Leah barged in uninvited.
The revealing, lavish outfit she wore made every single monk blush with embarrassment. He gripped his wine glass tightly and barked.
Do you have any idea where you are?
How dare you dress like that?
Instead of getting angry, Leah smirked.
But dear brother, didn't you want to see me?
Of course I had to come. She casually claimed the seat right next to him, as if it were hers by right.
With a seductive smile playing on her lips, she purred.
Look at me. Didn't I dress up just to keep our little date? You know how I am, big brother. The more you pretend you don't want to see me, the more I know you're dying for me to be here. Seeing your face always makes me so happy, brother. Are you feeling just as happy?
Gareth gritted his teeth and replied, I was, until you showed up.
Are you trying to push the absolute limits of my patience? Lee rested her elbows on the table and said lazily, Why say something so hurtful?
Don't you think you're being a bit too harsh?
She turned to the abbot across from her with a look of mock innocence, seeking his agreement.
Gareth grabbed her slender wrist in a tight grip. It seems you're in heat. If you're so desperate for a bed partner, go pick one from your own entourage.
If you drag the royal name through the mud with another filthy scandal, I promise I'll ruin that pretty face of yours.
Tara suddenly tilted her head in a provocative challenge. And what are you going to do about it?
If you're going to talk like that, brother, it would be terribly rude of me not to play along. Wouldn't it?
The last thread of his sanity finally snapped. He reached out, his hand wrapping tightly around her slender neck.
In that split second, a heavy hand clamped down on his shoulder. Gareth's whole body stiffened.
He looked up, meeting Baltus's eyes. Everyone is waiting for you, your highness. The hand resting on his shoulder squeezed with crushing force. In that single instant, he felt the cold threat of death. Gareth repeatedly warned himself to stay calm. Forcing down his rage, he shook off the man's arm. Then, he raised his wine glass once again and offered a toast in a dramatic, theatrical voice.
Only Leah watched the farce unfold with a cold, mocking sneer.
Just then, Baltus gently pried open the young woman's palm and slipped a silver goblet into her hand.
Please observe basic guest etiquette, your highness.
Leah's body went rigid at the sudden physical contact
And glared back at him with a sharp, piercing look.
Gareth expected the woman to shatter the glass immediately.
But to his surprise, Leah actually complied.
Gareth stared at her with deep suspicion.
What exactly was her game?
Take.
Regardless, the moment he ascended the throne, he would erase her from this world completely. Leah pretended to take a sip, bringing the goblet to her lips, only to realize her fingertips were trembling slightly. She immediately put the glass down.
The skin where Baltus had touched her burned like fire.
She slipped her hand under the table, trying to appear unaffected,
and licked her dry lips.
Suddenly, a wave of frustration washed over her. She really shouldn't have worn this dress, knowing full well he wouldn't even look her way. Her nerves were still wound so tight, they actually ached.
Does the food not suit your taste, your highness?
The sudden voice made Talia flinch. Thalia deliberately shrugged her shoulders. Compared to the palace's feasts, it is indeed a bit humble. Her offhand comment left the priest feeling quite embarrassed. She casually picked up a small piece of cake, thinking that if she kept herself busy eating, no one would try to talk to her. That was when she noticed Barcus staring dead at her.
She forced down a sip of wine, fighting back her nausea.
Feeling absolutely disgusted inside, she wanted nothing more than to leave this place immediately. Arcus's silent protection had long since deeply touched Leah's heart, and he, who had always been cold and unfeeling, experienced his very first emotional stir because of Leah. This dreadful dinner was already grating on his nerves, and those priests were still casting malicious looks at him. Their gazes only made him feel more disgusted. She stood up abruptly from her seat.
What a disappointing dinner.
I'm going back to bed. Gareth shot her an irritated look. Leah didn't even bother to glance back, quickly escaping the hall and stepping out into the corridor.
Leah took a deep breath, sometimes wondering why she even did things like this.
What was the point of parading herself in front of everyone, just to cause trouble?
The crown prince seems utterly unable to tolerate your existence.
Samir's smug whisper from that day echoed faintly in her ears once more. At the late Empress's memorial service, Gareth had roared out of control. Leah had crawled, trembling, to her mother's feet. But before the tears of relief could even fall, Leah caught a glimpse of a smug, triumphant look sweeping across Sinavir's face. It was probably from that day on that she began seizing every opportunity to provoke Gareth. Her reputation, which had already hit rock bottom, was now completely in tatters. As long as Mother is happy, that's all that matters. Leah couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. To think she actually still hoped to earn her mother's affection. Even if she dragged the crown prince's reputation through the mud, Sinavir would never love her.
Her mother loved absolutely no one, neither the Emperor nor Astros, whom she doted on so dearly. To her, everything and everyone was merely a tool and a means to an end. A sudden voice calling, "Your Highness," jolted Leah back from her thoughts. It was the priest who had been staring at her intently throughout the banquet. Leah instantly tensed up. Did he follow me here? Suppressing her fear, she forced herself to sound authoritative. What do you want? She glared at him with a cold, piercing gaze. The priest stammered. What you just said. Frowning in annoyance, she snapped. I have absolutely no idea what you're babbling about. I'm leaving. The man blurted out in desperation. Didn't you say you wanted to fulfill the crown prince's expectations? Leah, who was about to turn around, suddenly froze in her tracks. That was nothing but a provocation. Licking his lower lip, the man crept closer. If only you would allow it, Your Highness. Leah felt every muscle in her body freeze. She knew she had to run immediately, but her legs refused to move. The man's hand stroked her soft hair. She struggled to breathe. She parted her lips, but no sound came out. Just then, an armored hand lunged from the darkness, clamping down hard on the man's wrist. Lee stumbled back, snapping out of her daze. She looked up and saw a pair of silver-blue eyes. In that instant, her heart sank into a bottomless pit. She instinctively pressed herself against the wall. Valka stood in front of her, expressionless. Then, he slowly turned his gaze toward the priest. The priest began to tremble violently, as if he had just seen a demon. Valka said coldly, I don't like repeating myself. Go back to your place. Until we leave, you had better stay out of my sight. The man scribbled and fled in terror. Valkas turned his gaze back to her. Even though she had done nothing wrong, her throat suddenly felt incredibly dry, and she looked at him again. Lee instinctively lowered her gaze. Then Valkas's voice sounded beside her. Come with me. I will escort you back to your quarters. In that instant, an overwhelming sense of grievance welled up inside her. I was almost subjected to something terrible just now. So how can you act so completely indifferent? Talia bit her lip, her expression filled with resentment. Before long, they arrived at her quarters. Staring straight ahead, she snapped. We're here. Stop following me. But before she could take more than a few steps, Valkas cornered her. He pressed closer and closer. Leah's eyes widened. She stared up at him thinking, what on earth is he doing? If you play with fire and get burned badly once, his voice was so raspy. It sounded like it was scraping against his throat. He seemed to realize it himself. Because a moment later, his voice sounded noticeably calmer. Shouldn't you learn to be a little more careful by now? Valt suddenly sneered. Or do you really just want to throw your life away? In today's video, I'm going to break down the main characters' backstories in the original novel. This will help you understand the storyline much better and truly connect with the plot. First, our female lead, Leah, is an illegitimate princess. Her mother, Sinevere, used every ruthless means possible to climb her way up to the emperor, giving birth to Leah before she even became the empress. Once the former empress passed away, Samir naturally moved into the imperial palace. And the very first thing she did was erase every single trace of the former empress. This made everyone in the palace absolutely despise this mother and daughter. But since no one dared to cross the empress, they targeted all their malice toward the young, defenseless Leah instead. The maids gossiped about her behind her back, and were incredibly rough whenever they dressed her up. At first, they only fed her cold leftovers. But later, they even started putting dead rats and centipedes into her soup. The first prince, Gareth, and the first princess, Ayla, also harbored a deep hatred for Sinevere. But because they were still young and powerless, they could only watch Leah with cold, spiteful eyes. In fact, Gareth would often violently beat her. Her own father, the emperor, never even looked at her. And once her mother became empress, she finally showed her true colors. To her, Leah was nothing more than a pawn. Useful. Exploit her. Useless. Throw her away. This brutal shift in her mother, Sinevere, made Leah crave love and affection more than ever. And that was when our male lead, Valchus, entered her life. Ignoring the freezing rain and the thick, muddy path, he gently pulled Leah out of the muddy pit and held her close. He even asked her softly, Are you cold? And as they parted ways, he kept his eyes on her from a distance, refusing to leave until he knew she was completely safe. How could she not fall head over heels for him? Later, Valkas served as Leah's personal guard for 7 years. So much happened between them during that time. I'll cover those stories in future webtoon recaps. As for why Leah grew up to be so incredibly wicked and unreasonable, living in such a high-pressure, abusive environment, she was left deeply, desperately insecure, only able to mask one's vulnerability with cold arrogance. Their personalities slowly became warped. The sharp contrast in the male lead, Barcus, is because he was raised under brutal training since childhood, completely stripped of his emotions, his memories of his younger years. That is why he didn't recognize the girl standing right before him. On one side is a female lead, desperate for warmth but twisted by a harsh reality, while on the other is a male lead, who has lost his emotions and forgotten his past. And so their tangled web of love and hate begins. That concludes our breakdown of the original story, and we hope it helps you better understand what happens next. Talia lashed out impulsively, but once again, her wrist was grabbed tight. Barkas added in an unhurried tone, Before this journey ends, I really don't want to deal with any more trouble.
He let go of her arm, slowly turned, and walked away.
I believe you understand now. If she had a knife in her hand right now,
Leah would have plunged it into his back without hesitation. She silently glared at his departing figure with deathly intensity, until a vision suddenly blurred.
she quickly turned her face away in a panic, even though she knew he would never look back.
She was still terrified he might see her tears. Roughly wiping her eyes with her sleeve, she rushed back into her bedroom, as if fleeing. Little did she know, Barkas had been watching her the entire time. The next day, the ceremony went on as scheduled, as if nothing had ever happened. Leaning against her bedroom window, Talia looked down at the twins marching toward the altar.
By right, she should have been among them.
But she had excused herself, using her poor health as a pretext. Reasonably, the ceremony should have been postponed, but the crown prince's unyielding attitude forced it to proceed as planned. Even the monastery was reluctant to bestow divine blessings upon a bastard child. If she had only known, she would have participated.
Smiling bitterly, Talia saw Elev and Barkas standing side by side in front of the altar, and the smile instantly faded from her lips.
Unable to watch any longer, she drew the curtains shut.
Throwing herself heavily onto the bed, the memories of last night kept swirling in her head.
Barkas's cold gaze. It was as if he was certain she had seduced that man.
He must be completely disappointed in me now.
Those buried memories began to unravel chaotically in her mind. That must have happened just a few months before she was set to come of age.
She was feeling anxious and restless about her approaching adulthood.
She insisted that he help her pick out her dresses and accessories.
It was just another one of her pathetic daily attempts to get his attention. After changing into the dress, she deliberately raised her voice.
I'm asking you, how do I look?
Barkas finally parted his tightly closed lips.
Like a child playing dress-up.
She made up her mind right then and there. Today she was absolutely going to make this stone-faced man blush. A moment later, she pulled out an even bolder dress.
How about this one? This time, some actual emotion finally flickered across his face.
But clearly, it wasn't a positive one.
Leah said, acting completely indifferent.
After all, it's a dress for my coming-of-age ceremony.
This much is just right, isn't it?
After thinking it over seriously for a moment, he said, for the first gown, wear that one. Her heart leaped with a sudden flutter of joy.
Then, she deliberately flashed him a knowing, playful smile.
You pretend like you don't care.
But you were actually watching so closely.
Humming a tune, Leah pulled out the very first dress she had tried on.
It's this one, right?
He didn't answer.
He just quietly stared at her.
Those eyes, which used to be so indifferent, had somehow started lingering on her face for a long time.
Keenly aware of this subtle shift in his gaze,
she felt a faint thread of anticipation stirring deep in her heart.
Maybe Barkas can't bear to part with me either.
After all, we've been together for so long.
Even if he disliked me, some feelings must have grown by now.
Talia clung tightly to this fragile, fleeting hope. If I dance in this dress, I'll definitely look like an elf queen, right?
Don't just stand there like a statue. Won't you practice a dance with me? Without waiting for his response, Talia suddenly grabbed his hand.
The man who in the past would have stood completely unshakable was now easily pulled toward her, totally caught off guard. See? Talia thought, a surge of triumph rising within her. Something really has changed.
At this moment, the girly flutter in Leah's heart was magnified 1,000 times. She pulled Barkas with all her strength, spinning him around, but her foot caught on a box on the floor, and she lost her balance.
Leah instinctively grabbed his arm as tight as she could.
Barkas hurriedly reached out and caught her by the waist.
The scattered clothes on the floor tangled around her ankles. The two of them tumbled to the ground, tangled together.
Leah muttered in annoyance, complaining that she should have cleaned up the room sooner.
Barkas, who had ended up getting dragged into the mess just to protect her, raised an eyebrow. He was only a guard knight, after all, not a servant. But Leanna still threw a petty tantrum.
If I get a bruise on my backside, I am never forgiving you.
She tried to push herself up,
only for a sharp, stinging pain to shoot through her scalp.
Leah glared at him in disbelief. Did you just pull my hair?
A short, quiet sigh escaped his lips. Your Highness's hair is caught in my cuff, he said.
With those words, he shifted his arm behind her back, tugging her hair again. As another sting of pain shot through her scalp,
Leah shrieked and pounded on his chest.
That hurts, you idiot.
He froze, quietly staring into her tear-glistening eyes.
Though Leah felt a bit self-conscious, she still forced herself to glare back.
Barkas let out another soft sigh,
then wrapped his arms back around her and began carefully untangling her knotted hair.
Leah darted her eyes around uneasily, only just realizing how incredibly intimate their position was.
She was sitting right between his knees, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst.
Leah nervously fidgeted with her fingers, squeezing out words in a raspy voice. If you dare break a single strand of my hair,
I will absolutely never forgive you.
He didn't reply, but the touch of his fingers seemed to grow even gentler. His open collar revealed his prominent Adam's apple, and his solid, flexing forearms were right in front of her.
His long legs, clad in wool trousers, pressed firmly against her.
Leah buried her burning, deeply flushed face down.
She suddenly noticed that even the insides of her wrists had turned red,
sending a sudden jolt of panic through her.
Was she blushing from head to toe?
How incredibly embarrassing would that be? Panicked, she raised her voice to a defensive pitch.
Enough. Just cut it off, and do it quickly.
The usually decisive, efficient man actually hesitated for a moment.
Marcus reached a hand down to his waist. Watching him draw his dagger, she instantly tensed up.
When his arm wrapped back behind her,
Leah subconsciously gripped the hem of his shirt.
But don't cut off too much of my hair.
Before she could even finish her sentence, at the soft click of his blade,
Leah spun around in a panic, terrified he would slice off a massive chunk of her hair. She looked back and saw a gleaming golden button lying on the floor.
she picked up the button and examined it closely.
Without her realizing, Barkas had already stood up and was sheathing his dagger back into his belt. How long do you plan on kneeling there?
For some reason, Leah felt strangely awkward. Coughing to hide her embarrassment, she held the button out to him. Barkas said indifferently, "I don't need it anymore. Just throw it away."
Suddenly, his gaze drifted toward the window,
Where the evening glow had already painted the entire sky red.
He turned back, scanning the messy room.
And sighed exhaustedly.
May I take my leave?
Leah nodded in silence.
When night fell,
Leah held the button, staring at it once again.
then she pulled out her jewelry box from beside the bed and tucked the button into the very bottom. That night, she tossed and turned, unable to sleep from a strange, fluttering sensation. An indescribable emotion made her chest ache with a burning warmth. She replayed his words and his gaze over and over again in her mind as a smile unconsciously curled her lips. She spent the entire night tossing and turning, completely swept up in a dizzying happiness. But the shattering of her foolish adolescent fantasies came much faster than she ever imagined. Only a few days later, news broke of Barkas's engagement to Ayla.